Welcome to the Safe Business Agility Podcast. This is the place to get advice, stories, perspectives, and updates about safe and related topics to help you work differently and build the future. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. On today's episode, we have Marcus Vogt from Capgemini and M. Sparing from Project and Team. We talk about the dynamics of bringing agility to traditionally non-agile spaces, to HR, to accounting, and places like that, and why this pattern of business-enabled arts is required for success in the post-digital economy. I hope you enjoy this one with Marcus and M. We are back at Safe Summit in Prague, and this time we're hanging out with M and Marcus. Marcus, tell us who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Marcus Vogt. I'm a senior director at Capgemini Invent, and I've been in consulting, for the better part of 15 years. I started out in the financial services space, but the last 10 years have been mainly focused on automotive and captive finance. And there, I've kind of found my passion about 10 years ago in the agile space. And then since then, it's been, everything else has been history, basically. So
you've been an agile guy for about 10 years.
Yeah, roughly.
Cool. Well, Marcus, you and I feel like we've known each other a little bit. M, I know of you, but I think this is the first time we met.
The infamous M. It's so nice to meet you in the flesh.
I think, to be fair, let's be clear. You're the other M.
The other M. I am. I'm Debbie Bray's M. Ooh,
right.
I can co-brand with that. Yeah.
That is kind of cool. I mean, Debbie's kind of a celebrity in this space.
She's iconic.
And the other M is a celebrity too, so I don't want her to hear this and think that I'm, not giving her credit.
And the two of us
due.
could never be confused. I don't have her charisma, but I'll take the first name. We can roll with that. We'll share it. She can have it on her continent. I'll have it on mine.
That is fair. I think there's a 1 M per continent limit.
I've hit the quota.
Well, so tell us a little bit about you, Em.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started in an enterprise function. So I'm a classically trained accountant. And did that for a good 15 years, spent a good decade at Boeing. And I love that my friend Marcus has 10 years in Agile. I'll say I've flirted with it for 10 or 12 years. And by flirting, I mean exactly what you'd imagine an accountant flirting with Agile would look like is pretty much what it looked like. But
you acknowledged its existence, but barely.
We would have fun little teams that would have 30-minute lunch, and they'd identify their top pain point and work it on a Kanban, which was fun. You're flirting.
Sure.
Yeah, but not really all in until about 5 years ago where I had a major transformation in a central function. And so it was that moment, that was our tipping point as a program, and dove all in. So having the opportunity to do that transformation internally in a central function made me really find my passion of what does that look like to stretch those boundaries, and then how can I move outward into a consulting space and help other humans go through that journey. So currently I'm partnering with Project and Team and have a wonderful opportunity to work with folks who are going through that and help navigate what that could look like for them in designing their future.
So you've come to the dark side of consulting and then the ultra dark side of working with Jeff and Project and Team.
I have.
For the trifecta, how did you get linked up with Marcus?
I mean, Marcus is the definition of dark side on this side of the ocean.
Totally. Yeah, that's my role here on the continent. Kind of. No, I think to answer that question a little bit, I think pretty much 2 years ago, we got into contact via Jeff, basically, so Project and Team. And then basically started working first on in the client context, but then also we came up with the idea, of course, on collaborating in the thought leadership space. And this is basically what we've been doing together over the last 1.5 years.
Well, with M coming from the accountancy space, I can only imagine what sort of cool IP you're developing and what functions you're looking at. So we're here to talk about agility in enterprise function. What was the first area, I'm asking, thinking I know the answer, that you both looked at together? What did you explore?
I think the first one, because of its pivoted role really in any agile transformation, is actually HR. Because, we all know there's, I guess, 2 angles to this. One is, you could say, there is HR at Agile, if you want to call it that.
HR operations.
Yeah, exactly. Or just getting HR involved in an Agile transformation in terms of, hey, we need new roles, we need new job descriptions, career paths, and things like that, incentives. And then the other way around, of course, also, we asked ourselves, okay, what does it mean to bring Agile into a corporate function like HR? Of course, we didn't stop at HR, but that's kind of like the first one you stumble across. Even if you implement one agile release train, this already becomes somewhat relevant.
Well, sure. You have the new roles: Scrum Master, Team Coach, Product Owner, Product Manager, and then you have legacy roles: Program Manager 3, Analyst 4, on and on and on and on. So the question is, how does this impact role grading, pay, all of those things? So it's certainly a very natural first convo, and it's usually not easy.
No, it's not. And what I would say to piggyback on that is the answer probably did surprise you that it was HR, given he has a background with banking and finance. I have the accounting degree. But organically, I think that's what sets it apart when you start looking at this from flow-based value and stream-aligned teams and arts, is when you're looking at what does it take from reward to retain or hire to retire, you start intertwining some of those central business corporate functions, right, with accounting, finance, HR. And so looking at that, how do you take the dichotomy of those two unique cultures, subsets, or organizations, and what does that look like when you put it in an agile space? Put them on teams, put them on arts. How do you construct that? And so that's, I think, what was really magnetic about meeting Marcus for the first time and having that conversation, is it's not a lot of people can come at it with some experience and exposure and really have the hard conversations about, here are the challenges that you commonly see when you start mixing those brands, so to speak, to create what could be successful.
So some experience I've had, I've in a previous life, I ran what we called the people agility practice within a large firm. And it was basically, rethinking HR operations. And I had the opportunity to introduce that with a few clients. And one of the things that I think is really cool and that I found to be an accelerator in that space is when you have HR and they're also embracing experience architecture. So they've already made the mental shift from, we exist to protect the organization from its employees, to a perspective of we seek to delight the employee from hire to retire. And then you look at those other negative paths as kind of like exit ramps, and we seek to optimize those as well. But our primary focus is, how do we get somebody in the front door? How do we make the hiring experience great? How do we train them? How do we go through the annual cycle in a delightful way every year? And then the goal being they eventually retire from us and remain in an alumni program so they can come back and continue to consult and help us as they need to for years to come. So my experience was it's a heck of a lot easier to have those conversations around new ways of working with an HR organization who's focused on the employee versus the HR organization that believes that they're the firewall between employees and management.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, it's this pivotal role that led us to kind of focusing on HR, also in a recent study that we published.
Where's that study, Marcus? Tell me a little bit. You can't just dangle it out there and not tell us.
Yeah, so it's called How to Become a Flow-Based Organization, and basically business agility in corporate functions. That's how we termed it. And basically there we looked at, this macro picture that we were talking about, and the fundamental role of different corporate functions, and especially their integration into what we would say is a product-centric organization, and how we believe that there is a certain maturity curve that organizations go through. And this is also where we had some conversations with, for example, with Rebecca and Mark on exactly those topics of how do the new patterns of Safe 6.0, how do they fit on such a maturity curve? This is, of course, not an exact science, but it's something where we've been looking at our past experiences, and we can see a kind of macro pattern emerge in terms of how they move through a maturity curve. And this is basically what we describe in that study.
So tell us a little more about that. Let's talk about the maturity curve as it relates to this context. I mean, what were without giving away the big aha at the end, right? What were some of your key findings?
Start small and start iteratively. I think anytime you're looking for a big bang, whether that's in a central function with a deployment or otherwise, looking for that first spot you want to start, and then really ensuring that you are leveraging the opportunity to experiment small and continue to build off of that cycle. And so a good example would say, with a central function, one of the experiences that I've had with deployments is oftentimes it could look like I'm HR and I'm implementing Workday, right? So now that's a big project based, you're pulling in IT, right? That's development. Doesn't necessarily touch the day-to-day operations. That HR analyst who's working on actually hiring people or promoting them or bringing them in, but they need to be tied in and on those teams, right? So you start iteratively, and how can you grow that organically and bring it in larger and larger. But what was really interesting, I think, is the study that came out from Capgemini that Marcus and his team brought into that paper around some of the success patterns and information that they have seen in just that with deployment.
And in terms of, I mean, absolutely agree that the start small and really have those short learning loops early on and continuously. That's something we call the minimum viable organization approach. So sounds fancier than it actually is. So it aligns quite well to, for example, starting up an art early to experiment in some part of the organization and then building on those learnings. And the goal in the end is that we want to move away from the classical consulting approach of saying, hey, we have a target operating model. We draw it up in all the detail, and then we just have to, walk a linear path there, because that will be the absolute anti-pattern of how to become an adaptive organization, but rather continuous learning loops throughout such a transformation with multiple MVO pilots, as we call them then. And that translates very well, as we've experienced at clients, to SAFe and leveraging SAFe in that context.
That's great. So, I mean, the HR piece it's really interesting, and it ties into a lot of what we're doing right now, right? I mean, so we're talking with Fabiola around the Agile HR Explorer piece, and we start talking about the different aspects of this. I think where you all are at is maybe a double or even triple click beyond that, right? Instead of just theoretically, how do we approach this? How do we approach people? How do we approach recognition, to how do we actually operate? Em, you mentioned Workday. Large enterprises run a very large hub and spoke model in HR. I mean, there is always technical people supporting HR, whether it's updating Workday, maintaining Workday, or whatever HRIS is. There's a big component to that. And you look at it, how HR and some of these corporate functions operate are really no different than how any other art operates. You have a core function, you have customers of that function, and those customers can choose to use you or not. A lot of functions are easy to outsource and things like that. So customer delight's a big deal. Employee satisfaction is a big deal. Compliance is a big deal. And then you have kind of your day-to-day power users. You don't have customer support, but you have recruiters that work in a high flow sort of environment. So you kind of have this context of maybe a platform art, which is your core technology. Then you have your other arts. The way that we looked at it was, we have the folks that are focused on, recruiting and retention, getting people in. Then we have the people that are focused on, kind of HR operations, the day to day. And as these organizations started looking at their business in that way and realizing that, well, we're not IT as we think of it, but how we run our business is a service organization like any other. And many IT organizations in enterprises are service organizations. So that operating principle is very similar. So what are your experiences in other areas of the business? I mean, have you looked at other functions? I know, Em, you have an accounting background. Have you touched the finance pieces at all?
So what I would say is that was a pivotal exposure for me with one of my first launches, is because we were doing major software, and it was for both HR and finance and accounting. It was at that time, quote, an IT-led project. It was very IT-centric, and they would come consult, hey, let me get your feedback, business analyst in HR or finance, and then I'll go build and come back in 6 months, a year. And it wasn't working through no fault of the wonderful IT folks. But it goes back to, how do you bring the agility into the central functions, have them own it? Yes, you'll have functional teams and be pulling in IT, but that ownership, to your point of, I own the service, I own the product, I need to own the content development and design. That marriage of DevOps in the function was really critical.
Well, and it's about words matter, right? And I think in a lot of organizations, I don't know how Boeing is now. I know that this was a common language pattern, but when you say things like business and IT, right? We're IT, we're going to go to the business and see what they think. You've already failed, right? Because you're not different. You serve them, they serve your customers. Together, you serve your customers. So you need to work together in the best interest to solve whatever the problem is for your collective customers. And I think, when IT first came into the world of business, we didn't understand it, so we set it over there. Then we didn't know how to capitalize it, so we still kept it over there. But that doesn't play true today, right? No matter what you do in an operational and any organizational function, there is 100% a technology component. And the minute we can start looking at those people as teammates, as opposed to those people over there, then it becomes easier to work together instead of it being us and them.
And I'll go a step further. It's critical. I'll be bold. to say that, Adam, I don't think you can be successful in today's modern world if you're not willing to be adaptive and say that from an IT or tech perspective, it is part of our DNA, irregardless of what central function you're in or what business you're providing on the globe. And so the sooner you can integrate that into how do I make that agile and how do I own that service and show up, I think that you'll find that you have success patterns.
Absolutely. Marcus, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree. And I mean, to really go on a very high level, what we're saying in the study is basically that this integration of the central or corporate functions is so key to every transformation. And if I think back to pretty much all the safe or agile at scale transformations that I've run, it's always where there's huge challenges. I mean, think of a business owner role not being really owned by the business, but you have some proxy there from the tech organization again. It's always a challenge, and that's where I also, like, when I first saw the new patterns, and we discussed them at SBCT Masterclass, it was interesting in the sense that my understanding was always an art should be what a business-enabled art is now as a pattern, right? But the experience shows that oftentimes it's not, and shared service alone is not going to be good enough, or it's misinterpreted in a way that it's too limited. And so I think opening that up and really saying, hey, this is one of the key levers of making your agile transformation successful, how you integrate the corporate functions. That's also what we aimed with the study, to kind of really focus on that when we got started last year with that study.
And I'm just going to jump in and say, Marcus, I'm realizing I wasn't accountable in answering the question, and I'm going to pull you in and make you help me with my homework. I think the question was, where outside of HR have we played in this space? It was exciting to get to launch Agile Release Trains, Solution Trains, and then LPM in the space with both accounting, finance, and HR with IT aside. So in LPM, right, everyone has skin in the game, to your point, but looking at all of those value streams of how do you perform long-range planning for 5 years for budgeting? How do you do payroll? How do you do your finance and accounting functions, your HR functions, and then what's that relationship with our teammates, keyword, in IT and how they play along? But that's been my segue both inside of Boeing and then with the clients that I've supported from a central function perspective. But I want to turn it over because Marcus has a depth of experience to kind of share his.
I want to pull a point out of that real quick because I think it's important. So again, Emmy, your background is you come from one of the largest makers of aircraft and defense equipment in the world. It is among the most complex places you could possibly work. And I think there's a really poor argument that people bring to the table, which is we're too big to do this stuff, right? You know, we're unique, we're special, we're different. That works for those small shops, but we're too different. We can't possibly bring finance and HR and all these people into our program and make it work cross-functionally. And I call that out because a lot of the things that you work on natively are structured in that way. So if you're building, I don't know, say a defense system, everybody who's needed to build that defense system is on that government word, not safe word, but program, right? They're all there. Cross-functionally, they're there. You have your own legal, you have your own accountants, you have your own HR. That is essentially run as its own standalone small business within an OpCo, within a massive global consortium. So it's not too far-fetched to think that we can do that. Right? It's a question of we need to get over our own mental barriers. And instead of saying why we can't, we need to start thinking in terms of, well, how could this make us better? So Marcus, back to you.
I fully agree. I mean, that's often what we try to do with our clients, right? That we start where we are, right? This old lean principle, you could say, or guidance, that we don't, start in some future state, but really we need to start where we are currently. So taking a program like that and then really experimenting there. Experimenting is always a harsh word, of course, in front of clients because we have that kind of down in terms of what we are trying to achieve here. But experimenting, of course, sounds a bit like learning by doing, which is not what we mean, but having really a structured process with learning loops and feeding that back into kind of a playbook of how are we going to scale Agile in this company, in the context of that company. And there, such a program I've experienced is always very often the best place to start, because it's kind of, you can, with certain management commitment, you can play by newer rules. You don't have all the bureaucracy necessarily in place, or you don't have to follow all the steer co-processes and stuff like that. So you can get your own rules. You can show that it works in the context of that company. And then based on the momentum you gain there, you can then really push further and beyond that program, to use that word again.
So have you both run into any, I don't want to say common blocks, but have you run into anything new in terms of patterns that applies uniquely to cross-functional, multidisciplinary, business-enabled trains that you didn't notice before in other contexts? Or has it all been pretty much, same patterns, different names?
I'm going to take a crack at it, but please feel free to add. Now thinking of the new patterns in SAFe, one that sticks out to me is, for example, the combined portfolio. Because probably not the only one, but the discussions around differentiating operational development value streams, I think it's an eternal discussion in many companies. And I really like the idea to have them combined in a portfolio to then really holistically look at how we are trying to move the needle for our end customer. So it's not so much a philosophical discussion, is something now a development value stream or an operational value stream. In the end, all of them should pay into what we create for our customers and what value we generate or business value we generate for them. And so I think that's really a pattern that without it being out there before is already something that was kind of on the horizon, I would say. I don't know, Em, how you see it.
That's an interesting one. I love that these questions are unprompted. So as I'm listening, I'm learning and the gears are turning. I think what has been unique for me is pulling on the portfolio answer. It does become complex when, especially in a large corporate environment, you have very powerful leaders with large span and control and oversight. And now you're having them work together to be aligned on priorities. And oftentimes that can be conflicting. And goodness forbid, can you imagine they don't all have an unlimited budget? So if you told everyone, bring your top 10 things you need to get done this year, the next 10 years, and now we're going to do fisticuffs so the five of us can agree on the priority. And so I think that's been a unique nuance, some of the dichotomy between the different business environments and how those leaders show up. But it's also been the most rewarding to see some courageous, agile leadership of folks who are willing to say, all right, to your point, we are a service. We do have something we are providing across the enterprise. How can we align behind that, sort our differences, so that we can really identify what's going to produce the most value for the company, for the employees, for the folks that we're serving? I
think what's most interesting at that level, and you're right, it definitely takes courage, is that promotions essentially come as a result of Hunger Games. Right? When you own a P&L, if you want the next level of promotion, well, you've got to beat your peers, right? And that's, kind of the Jack Welch style of management, which is the fittest survive. And it's, you can read his book and see in GE. I mean, he took his three best people, put them against each other, and one person got the job, the other two had to find new jobs. And that is, kind of the corporate culture that a lot of these leaders have been brought up in, is to believe that that's how it works. So it's not in my best interest to say, well, my idea is not the best. Actually, Marcus's idea is the best, because in the back of my head, I'm thinking, and I just gave him the next opportunity. I've sacrificed my own career growth for his. Great. And it's not about what's best for the company or the customer. In those dynamics, it becomes about what's best for me. And I think one of the unique challenges we have through the work that we do, right, is to rewire that. Like, how do we reprogram that? How do we change that leadership and that, going back to the HR piece, with that career pathing dynamic, where it's not the person who wins that gets the most. It's the person that, helps us achieve the best outcome. That's the best. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can look at, but this win or die thing that we've built into management, we've got to figure out a way to overcome that.
Yeah. And it's funny because we've financially incentivized that with how we reward from a corporate structure, not just one company in particular, but it's common. And I think what I would point to is it is probably as simple and uncomplex as the business relationship that you see with Project and Team and Cap and Gemini, right? Instead of competitors, how can we team together to create more or be more as a whole than we are separately? And it takes a level of vulnerability and courage from leaders, and having the right internal change agents and then consultants or coaches to be able to support that, emotional vulnerability, to have that conversation at that level of how do we win together? What does that look like? It's not me against you. It's us against 2023 or whatever objective or challenge we have.
Marcus, what's it like working with a bunch of Americans?
It's a lot of fun. I mean, as Em said, it's enriching really, the different experiences, the different backgrounds, and in the end, we see a lot of overlaps in the challenges our respective clients are facing, and then we find, of course, also clients where we then bring those complementary pieces together, and it's to the best of really the client's interest, right? In the end, our customer. So we could say that we are different development value streams or operational value streams coming together for the client in a way. So it's a lot of fun, and it's also the study was really cool co-creation. As always, these things tend to be quite time consuming, especially towards the end when you're trying to get it over the finishing line. But we made it, and really glad it's out.
Yeah, so I just want to jump in, steal the microphone, literally. I had a blast co-writing with Marcus and his team, and appreciation for working with English second language authors and just like sentence structure, right? If you think about the German and English language, and then just the approaches that we've had in our experiences. So it was this beautiful blend. But I have to say, the piggyback, Marcus, is as I was sitting in Summit this week, and it was on Tuesday, we had that presentation about ChatGPT, which I've been using professionally, maybe playing a little personally, because let's be honest, it's addictive, right? So I'm in there. But I was like, oh my gosh, the amount of time that you and I spent beating the heck out of semantics or sentence structure, or even the title. I think we had 5 or 6 renditions. Lots of fun and creativity. Enjoyed that. But I was like, we should have taken it for a spin through there. Or were you taking it through? We did homework sometimes. Were you taking it through ChatGPT?
No, not those. But where we actually used it, I think I can say that, is we asked ChatGPT if we should call it, so a working title was Business Agility in Central Functions, because that translated well from German, where it's literally the translation. We asked ChatGPT how to best call it. And so the proposal was either from ChatGPT, call it support function, which we didn't like, or corporate function. This is how we ended up in the final title, actually. So we actually used it in that sense.
You got to be careful with that, Marcus, because ChatGPT is probably going to index this, and maybe you'll start getting a request for royalties. You never know. I mean, hey. So, we're going to start winding this down, and I want to ask you, I feel like you've had quite the career transition over the last 5 or 6 years. What would 2023 M say to 2018 M? How would you coach that person?
Oh.
Don't you like unscripted questions?
I do, and it's so funny because I've had some major time to reflect on this, both in my personal and professional life. 2018 M was just as passionate and driven to help people and find solutions, but she was afraid to step outside the shelter and the structure
of corporate America,
of 100-year-old corporate America, with beautiful and amazing things that it does for the industry. Grateful again for the decade that I spent there, but just to stretch her wings and to explore what it's like to connect with people on other continents and co-write a white paper or explore thoughts or come to a summit in Prague and do a podcast with a rock star like you. So I would say, just do it. Because if you fail, like anything else, it's an experiment. You're going to learn, you're going to pick yourself up and go back again. And nothing really worth having is obtained without failure and trying.
I think that's really a good soundbite, given what I feel like a lot of people in the world are dealing with right now. And that's sometimes when the security, you either elect to give it up or that it's taken from you, it's an opportunity for a rebirth and to try some of the things that through the shelter of security, you were like, that could be cool, but this is easy, right? That paycheck is easy. That stability of a 100-year-old company with 20 some years of aircraft orders, like that's, there's some security in that. You're not too worried about, buying new furniture for the house, but taking that risk, it's an important thing. I think that can translate individually to something that people want to do on their own. I think from an enterprise or organizational perspective, the same holds true, right? We've got to take risks. If we want to evolve, we have to take risks. And I think the organizations that view themselves as the most stable are probably the most likely for disruption next. Marcus, what about you? What would you say to you 5 years ago?
Luckily, I had some minutes to think about that. It's hard to top the self-reflection that Em just put on stage here, but I would say, I mean, back in 2018, agile transformation space was in Europe was still very much developing, and I think back then, of course, I didn't know where it was going to go. So I really believed that a lot of the digital transformations that were already ongoing, they were going to need that as the flip side of the medal in a way, right? The way of working, that it really had to scale across the entire company and not just, stay at the team level agility. And so really believing in that and doing internal lobbying for the topic, building up a great team that I really enjoy working with every day. That I think to kind of reaffirm myself in that belief, that would probably be something I would tell my 2018 self.
So to flip that, when you think about the future of the work that we do, what are you hopeful for over the next 5 years, Marcus?
Well, I think what really has changed, I think, in the last 5 years is that the topics that we are passionate here for have really landed at the top level CEO agenda. I think that's great. That's awesome. That wasn't there 5 years ago, I would say, not across the board at least. So I think it's our kind of obligation to make sure that they stay there, but in a positive way, in a way that, hey, these are really things where the CEO feel we're heading, or they as companies are heading in the right direction, and to really have sustainable success with this new way of working, that it doesn't fizzle out because they, didn't take middle management along, for example, or didn't change career paths, and it's agile at scale or safe is not a hobby. Things like that it really becomes ingrained in the new company culture. I think that's our responsibility, and that's a great and fun task, I would say.
Em, do you want to close us down with your thoughts?
And I think it piggybacks on you allowing me to reflect on what I'd say to Em 5 years ago, which is that now as a globe, politically, from a health perspective, from a business perspective, we have all had challenges and disruptions, and it's only growing. And I think particularly right now, we're at the cusp of another revolution in the tech space, in the global space, and I'm excited to see what that looks like. I think the hope, the design that I would have of 5 years from now is to say, wow, look at how we took these challenges, these opportunities, and as we advanced in the space of technology, we also advanced in our humanness and our ability to cooperate and work together, not just in business or central functions or agile teams, but as humanity, so that we can create great things and pursue them.
I want to thank you both for taking the time. Em, it was a pleasure. Marcus, always good to see you. We'll catch you soon.
Thanks, Adam. Bye.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. The entire team at Scaled Agile is focused on helping you be better at work so that you can help your enterprise be more successful in the new age of business. If there's anything else we can do to help, if there are any other assets you'd like to see, content, podcast guests, just let us know. Also, please check out Safe Studio, where you'll find tools, toolkits, resources, videos, and so much more to help you be successful in the world of work. As always, if you appreciate this content, the greatest compliment you can give us is a referral to a friend or colleague. And if you feel so inclined, we do always appreciate those likes, comments, subscribes, and reviews on your podcast platform of choice. My name is Adam Mattis. Until next time, as they say, stay safe.